Uh-oh, now I'm recorded. So the nature is to what? Run away. A trained warrior, a trained soldier, a Marine, anyone that's trained in battle, they run to the battle. They're trained to go after it. And it's not just wait back and wait for someone else to make a mistake or someone else to fall down. No, you're going to go take care of business. Now, our battle is a little different. I mean, I know some of us are prior military, and that background is in us. Part of my duties were carrying a weapon and preparing to defend a ship or to defend a base, and that mindset is one thing, but not everyone's got that mindset. But we have to on this front. There's a heaven to gain and a hell to shun, and there's a battle that's too important not to fight. Use an example in 1 Samuel 17:43. I think it's one we've heard of before. If somebody want to read that, 43 through 49. Anybody online want to read that, or? No, I'm going to start volunteering people. You got it? Armand's got it. Thank you.
1 Samuel 17, starting in verse 43. And then the Philistines said unto David, I am a dog, that thou comest to me with staves. And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistines said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the field. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and take thy head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the hosts of the Philistine this day unto the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord, and he will give you into our hands. And it came to pass, when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hands in his bag, and took thence a stone, and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth.
So, the background of this story is David is not a warrior, not in the sense of what the king thought, or even his brothers who were there for the battle. He was a young, ruddy youth, wasn't a rugged-looking man, he was just a kid. And by fleshly standards, he had no business being there. And for fact, he was only there because he was sent to go check on his brothers. And he was angered, and he saw something that needed to be taken care of. And you look at that whole scenario, and even to think that the king himself would have said, okay, go ahead. It just blows my mind. But I like what David said, I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel. He didn't come with wielding his own power. He didn't come to say, I've trained to fight like this. He didn't come touting his weapons. He came in the name of the Lord. And when the Philistines rose to him, it said he ran to the battle. He said he ran, and David hastened and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. So he was running towards Goliath, but he was running towards an entire army with no fear. He knew his God would deliver him. And my whole point is that he ran to the battle. And it didn't matter what anyone else had to say. And as you read that story, the Philistine army was taunting, and Goliath specifically taunting Israel. Now, if I'm standing here as David, I'm looking back, I'm looking at the Philistine, and I'm looking at the army of Israel. The army of Israel was not a puny army. It was no small thing. It was nothing to take lightly. But what happened? The Philistines, they got in Israel's head. They taunted them and basically challenged them, and just, we talk about, I think Jesse talked about the war for the heart starts in your mind, the battle for our souls. And they got into the minds. They actually, they made them afraid to where they wouldn't do anything. And David wasn't fooled by this. And one of the big things we can see, even in current events today, information, disinformation. And I'll talk a little more about that as we go on. Information in your current situation. There's another story in Exodus 4. I don't know if I want to read all of this. Next, I'm going to read 10 through 16, but I want to set this up. So Israel had just been delivered from Egypt. The 14. So they'd been delivered. The plagues had gone on, and the final plague of the death of the firstborn. And Israel it says they spoiled them. They just gave them stuff and sent them out. They wanted them gone because enough of these plagues. Now we've lost our firstborn of everything. Get out of here. And Israel has left. They're traveling. And now they're up against the Red Sea. And now they're looking on one side, they got nowhere to go, and there's a giant dust cloud on the horizon because Pharaoh had said, wait a minute, what did we just do? I'm coming after these people. We're going to go get back what's ours. Why did we let them go from serving us? So now Israel's got their back to the Red Sea. Circumstance. God made this whole thing happen. But the circumstance was just such that this did not make any sense. Pharaoh said, I got you. You guys are stupid. You guys are backed up against the Red Sea. And Israel's like, well, I'll read it. Actually, I'll read it. I'll start at 10. And when Pharaoh drew nigh to the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. And they were sore afraid, and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. And they said unto Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt with us to carry us off forth out of Egypt? Is not this the sword that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, let us alone that we may serve the Egyptians? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than it would be to die in the wilderness. Moses said unto the people, fear not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show to you today. The Egyptians whom you have seen today, ye shall see them again no more. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. And he stretched out his rod as God told him to do, and they walked through on dry land. And not just they walked through on dry land, they got to the other side. Pharaoh says, okay, I can do this too. And it didn't work out so well for him. So then the waters collapsed and none of them survived. Circumstance. What do we see? What does God see? What is God putting before us? Fighting battles, running to the battles, fighting the right battles, fighting it the way God tells us to fight it. Jericho. They're around the wall of a city. They're around a walled city. They've got it besieged. They've got it, surrounded. Nothing goes in or out. But yet, there's these mighty walls around this city which they couldn't get through. And God tells them, take your armed men, take the ark, put your armed men, and walk around 6 times. And those 6 times, don't say anything. Don't shout, don't yell, just walk around. And on the 7th time, he told them to shout, and the walls came down. And then he told them, don't take anything from the cursed city. God gave him a lot of specific instructions on that. He told him to destroy everything except for keep Rahab alive, the one that had delivered them. And I thought it was interesting. They had him walk around with the Ark of the Covenant. I mean, that's significance. I mean, there was times when they went to get the Ark of the Covenant. Why? Because that was the power of God with them. But what do we have? Do we have an ark to go before us? Not a physical box, not something you put rods in and hold on to, no. But we do have something. We have a light that shines in us. We have the Spirit of God in our lives. And like Matthew 5:16, it says, "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." Let your light. It's your light. It's not a prideful thing. The things that God gave me, if I have a light to shine, how did I get it? God gave it to me. It's not a prideful thing. It could be if we're not careful. But let your light so shine. Let people see what you do. Don't just hide it. There are things that we do in secret, but let your works be made known for God's glory. And that's why, like in James, it talks about having things and seeking for the right reasons. If you're seeking it for the right reasons, God's going to be glorified. And the power of God's going to go forth. And we see walls come down. We see things in our lives just disappear that you ever had a situation where you just, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And God says, go do this. I know people look at me crazy, whenever I say stuff like that. God spoke to me. Huh? What? Who? Yeah. But I'm looking for a room full of people that could all testify to the same thing. And God says, go do this, and it does not make a bit of sense to me. And I go do that, and all of a sudden, whatever that wall is, falls. It just comes down. And in a way that I could have never imagined. So, going back to battle. I hesitate to go too far into this, but we've got current battles going on around the world, but there's been battles going on for a long time. And in every battle, you got information, you've got speculation, and you've got straight up misinformation. In any battle. I mean, even go back to the days when if you wanted to send a message, you had to write it out and give it to somebody, and they had to go run or get on a horse and ride somewhere and take and deliver that message. You don't think the enemy wasn't looking for a defector to put that uniform on them to go put their own message and send it so they could steer the battle the way they wanted to. Or intercept it so you know what's going on. I mean, we see it play out in the news all the time. Of course, we don't find out till after the fact because that's the craziness of having internet and the news, because if everything we saw about whatever current battle was going on was true, then the enemy knows what the other's doing. So you can't count on any of that. Now, go back to the battle for your heart. It starts in your mind. The battle for your soul. You don't think the devil wants to spread disinformation? You can't do that. You can't overcome that. You don't have what it takes to do that. That's not for you. Or you should go do that. It goes both ways. Or this is your calling. Try the spirits. Going to read all this, but this is a lot of reading. It's going to, you have to pick it. It's in Matthew 24. Yeah, I'll start in verse 1. And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple, the stuff. And Jesus said, see not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And he sat upon the Mount of Olives, and the disciples came to him privily, saying, tell us when shall these things be? And what shall the signs of thy coming and the end of the world? And Jesus said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled. For all these things must come to pass. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in divers places, and these are the beginnings of sorrows. And then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. Then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another, and many false prophets shall arise, and shall deceive many. Depending on where you live in the world, a lot of the things that in this nation, we're scared to death of a lot of things because we haven't had foreign troops on our soil in a long time. No one's dared to come over here. Now, in the military, I went to Israel. It's a whole different scenario there. You go to the Middle East, you go to a lot of these places over there. I'm taking a bus somewhere, and I'm watching people walk around with assault weapons, and they're reservists, but they're doing their normal day-to-day job. I was in a business. I was actually in a gun range. We were using it for our ship's qualifications. It's part of we had to learn how to shoot guns. We were pierside in Haifa, Israel. There's nowhere to go. You can't just go out and shoot off the fantail there. They're not real happy with that. So we were using their gun range, and I was done early, and we walked over to a different side, and there's this guy pulls up in his Domino's pizza car right outside the building, wearing his uniform and everything, walks in, buys some ammunition, dumps out the rounds that he keeps in his gun, puts a few target rounds in there, fires them off, reloads his gun, puts it in his holster, goes back to work. Now, what's the point of that? The point is, they live different. Life is full of tragedies and wars and rumors of wars, and in the Middle